In this video, we're talking about low back pain. Alright, so Sean on his back. This time talking about a big topic for all you guys out there, all the throwers out there, big, strong, but yet still have debilitating lower back pain. It's a struggle, I know. I've dealt with it quite a good bit throughout my career. This video is kind of a document of my experiences with low back pain and what I've done to overcome them and circumvent the whole struggle of having low back pain. So for me personally, when I have an injury of any kind, my go-to thing is to figure out why it happened. And for most people, some think, oh, I lifted this wrong and my back popped and blah, 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 and it hurt, and I don't know. But usually the straw that broke the camel's back, aka your back popping, is usually just a symptom of an underlying cause or root problem, if you will. Usually when injuries happen, whether it's chronic or acute, any kind, it doesn't matter, that injury is usually caused as a result of that body part or that muscle compensating and doing the work of another muscle that is dysfunctional in some sort. You just need to figure out what body part is your low back compensating for. I think the best course of action is to look both upstream and downstream of the affected area. Which of these areas are not performing the way that they should be in order to keep my low back healthy? So yeah, so your back hurts and something else in your body is not performing its job as well as it needs to. So we need to get rid of not only the low back pain, the symptom, but we also need to get rid of the root cause, the problem for which your back is hurting. So for this, I like to use a sort of shotgun approach, kind of what I do with most things. If I try to take everything and try to hit it from as many different points as possible to try to tackle it as quickly as possible. So let's say when it comes to covering up your symptoms or managing your symptoms of low back pain, which is for most people, like I said, usually tightness or discomfort, limited range of motion, occasionally pain, depends on each person. The low back is a very finicky area. So this short-term approach to managing low back pain is really for extreme cases. So like, let's say it's the week of a conference meet or it's the week of a championship meet, NCAAs, whatever it might be. You're lifting or you're throwing and you tweak your back a little bit and you're like, oh man, this is tight and it hurts. But you're like, I don't have time to go see a chiropractor. I don't have time to do an 8-week rehab program. I need to do everything I can to make sure that this back feels good in a very short time frame. That's what these short-term approaches are for. So first and foremost, number one thing to do to help low back pain, and this is not by any means like a cure-all, but take some sort of anti-inflammatory. My go-to is ibuprofen. You could use Tylenol, I guess, or even like CBD, because that's legal now, at least the hemp-based kind, not the cannabis derivative. Using some sort of anti-inflammatory can help manage the pain and at the very least get you back to training in the meantime. That being said, don't overdo it with this stuff. As a younger athlete, like back when I was in college, I would use ibuprofen for nearly everything. And anything that hurt, I would just pop some ibuprofen and just wave it off and get back to training as hard as possible. What's important to realize when you do have these sorts of injuries that pop up, and they are, chronic for the most part, meaning that you're dealing with them for a long period of time, but you just take that ibuprofen just to get through this next training day, through this next throwing session, or through that next lifting session, is usually not a good strategy. These injuries are your body's way of telling you that you're doing something wrong. Like I said, something within your body is dysfunctional. You need to get to that root cause. Like I said, this is just short-term stuff. So taking anti-inflammatories in the short term is not that harmful. Yes, ibuprofen can be deleterious to the gut, and I'm pretty sure Tylenol affects the liver, and also taking too much ibuprofen can interrupt muscle protein synthesis. It can damage the lining of the stomach. Taking too many anti-inflammatories for too long of a period is bad. Number two, another short-term strategy, in my opinion, is wearing a belt. If you've gone back and looked at some of my old Instagram videos or throwing videos on YouTube, you'll see me wearing a black and orange soft belt, and that can definitely help out with low back pain. Like I said, I've dealt with it a lot throughout my younger years. I had a lot of dysfunctional movement patterns and dysfunctional joints and muscles and things that I've fixed up over the past couple of years, so I haven't had to rely on that soft belt as much. But that being said, using those sorts of soft belts are very good because they provide warmth and stability for your back, which is usually what it needs, once again, at least in the short term. The one that I use in my videos is called the Nordic Sport Lumbago. Another option outside of the soft belts is to use a hard belt, more of a weightlifting belt. That hard leather belt provides a very good source of stability if used properly. But once again, I think these are just short-term fixes. While yes, in the short term, they'll provide stability, in the long term, I think relying on the use of a belt is not a very good strategy. That is because the more you use a belt, this sort of pushing out Valsalva sort of bracing strategy with the use of a belt, I think can lead to muscle dysfunction within the psoas. Your psoas is a hip flexor. Deep hip flexor connects your femur to your spine. And the psoas is a stabilizer of the lumbar spine. If your psoas is dysfunctional, your lumbar spine will not stabilize properly. If your lumbar spine does not stabilize properly, then your erectors or your abs or your obliques will become overworked and ultimately end up with some sort of overuse injury, whether it's low back tightness, low back pain. For me, I've even had pain and kind of the overuse strains of the obliques. So keep that in mind. Your psoas is important to your low back health. And like I said, wearing a weightlifting belt for too much, for too long, for every lift, for every throw, is a way to create dysfunction within the psoas, meaning that you will no longer be able to stabilize your spine without the use of that weightlifting belt. Once again, a short-term strategy, a short-term fix to a big-time problem. That being said, I only use a belt now, I don't know, I think I've used a belt twice over the past year, not even kidding. Get strong without using a belt, learn how to brace properly without using a belt, and your back will thank you. And another third short-term fix is to use something like Icy Hot, or personally I prefer, I believe it's called Hot Stuff by Mueller. So before practice, when my back is hurting me or when I just need that short-term fix, outside of the ibuprofen and the soft belt, I used to take this stuff, like I said, it was called Hot Stuff, and you'd throw it on your back, rub it on just before practice, before you even warm up, and then you put your soft belt on and then start warming up, and then over time, as your body starts to create heat, your pores open up and this stuff gets sucked into the pores and it gives you that nice hot burning sensation. I mean literally burning, like it feels like your back is on fire. That actually helps dull the pain a little bit, because science,
yes, science!
This burning sensation helps override the pain signal. Once again, it's a very short-term fix. Drastic times call for drastic measures. Acupuncture can be useful for alleviating pain and improving muscle function a little bit. Once again, a short-term fix. Getting acupuncture every week just to maintain your back health is probably not the best route. But once again, if in the short term you do need to fix yourself up, acupuncture is a good thing to look into. So those are the short-term approaches to managing low back pain. So the long-term fix is figuring out what exactly is going wrong in your body. What area is not working the way that it should be? What area is dysfunctional? To do so, go see a specialist, see a chiropractor, see a physical therapist. Do some sort of testing to figure out what muscles and what joints are not working the way that they should. That's usually the best route to go. Figure out where you're limited in range of motion. Figure out where you have muscle deficiencies bilaterally. Maybe you have one hamstring that's weaker than the other, or maybe you have one ankle that has more limited range of motion than the other. I don't know. There's a million different ways that your body could be dysfunctional. Keep in mind though that the body isn't intended to be perfectly symmetric, but if there is a large discrepancy in some sort of muscle function or joint range of motion, then yes, that is probably a contributing factor to why you have low back pain. Take for example myself, my left ankle range of motion is limited. I can't dorsiflex, I can't pull my toe up quite as much as I can on my right side, so that creates some tilt and torsion throughout my lower body, which affects my SI joint, which gives me low back pain. Another long-term fix is obviously fixing your technique. So let's say if you did have a one-off event where your back popped and then it was followed by some pain and tightness, whether it was you throwing or lifting, chances are that you put your body in a compromised position, and that is why that occurred. So the best way to not put yourself in a compromised position is to learn proper technique. So whether it's lifting technique or throwing technique, it doesn't matter. Learn proper technique. But that's usually a good course of action. Figure out what is wrong with your technique, what movement caused pain, and figure out why you got into that position. And figure out how you can stop yourself from getting in that position, or how you can strengthen that position so that your back does not hurt. In my opinion, a lot of my low back pain or low back injuries were caused by an unstable pelvis. So if your pelvis isn't stable, meaning that you don't have the proper ability to brace and control your abs and torso and hips and everything from here to here, you can't quite see, but literally everything from your chest to your butt cheeks. If you don't have the proper motor control and you don't have the proper mobility, then yes, those things will be a large contributor. Once again, upstream and downstream, those things will be a large contributor to low back pain. But in terms of specific muscle groups in this torso that you should focus on, the number one thing you should focus on is, like I said, the psoas. Making sure that your psoas is functional and mobile and strong is a big way to help keep your low back healthy. On top of that, your glutes are another big contributor to low back health. If your glutes aren't functional, if they aren't strong, if they don't work when they're supposed to work or how they're supposed to work, then your low back, your QL, your erectors will compensate, do extra work to get the hip extension that you will be lacking from your glute. Moving down the chain, looking at the adductors and abductors also help stabilize the pelvis. Once again, there are a million different ways to improve function of these muscles, but just make it a priority. So like for me, to activate my psoas before lifting, I'll do stair climb machine, stair step machine, I don't know, because that very deep hip flexion movement helps activate the psoas. On top of that, I do a good bit of glute activation exercises before I lift and before I throw. And in terms of adductors and abductors, those are, in my opinion, some of the most neglected muscle groups for low back health, for throwing health in general. With how much work those muscles do, they're often, like I said, undertrained for how much work that we expose them to as throwers in terms of the lateral movement and the stability aspect of the knee and hip. So those are the main muscle groups that I would focus on to help manage low back pain. And a good thing to look into in terms of muscle activation, and it sounds kind of funky, but it's called a reflexive performance reset. That's been a big help for me since I've gone to Minnesota and I worked with Cal Dietz. He would do RPR on me usually every couple weeks to keep me tuned up, make sure that everything's working the way that it should, that all my muscle firing patterns were spot on, were locked in. Once again, look at the range of motion of the ankle, of the knee, of the hip, internal, external rotation, hip flexion, hip extension, of the T-spine, the thoracic spine, the cervical spine. If there is a big deficit bilaterally, or even just a deficit on both sides, meaning that you don't have enough range of motion classified as normal, once again, that's probably a contributor to your low back pain and an indicator that some sort of muscle is also not working properly because it doesn't have the strength to be mobile. So like for me, my left hip internal rotation is very poor for whatever reason. I don't know why. So my left hip internal rotation was lacking. Therefore, whenever I would go into a deep ass to grass squat, when I needed that hip internal rotation, it wasn't there. So where do you get the range of motion when you don't have it? You get it from another joint. Like I said, something else compensates for it. So for me, the left side of my pelvis had to rotate slightly to compensate for the lack of range of motion. So that aggravated the SI joint, the left SI joint, and contributed to low back pain. So once again, if you're lacking range of motion in a specific area, examine it more closely, figure out why it's happening, and figure out how it may be affecting your technique in the weight room, in the circle, and why it may be contributing to back pain. If you can figure those things out, doing those things will help, once again, keep you healthy and help manage your low back pain, and it will help conquer that root cause, if you will. Or even like for me, my T-spine didn't used to be very flexible, very mobile. It still isn't great, but it's improved, and the healthier my T-spine has gotten, the healthier my low back has gotten, because once again, lacking range of motion throughout the thoracic spine means it needs to come from somewhere else. So if you don't have the ability to extend at the thoracic spine, then your low back will extend instead to do any sort of overhead movement. So once again, contributor to low back pain. There's a million different reasons why your back may be hurting. So that's why you guys need to do your own research and figure these things out. I'm just trying to help you guys kind of draw out a plan. I think that covers everything. If you guys enjoyed this video, share it with a friend, share it with your teammates, share it with your coaches. That way you guys can all stay healthy and we can all throw farther. Go keep those backs healthy.